Let's call this meeting to order at 7 p.m. We're going to start with a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Sunshine Law notice. In accordance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act, public meetings may be held in person or by means of communication equipment to include streaming services and other online meeting platforms. This meeting is being held in person through the Zoom meeting platform being broadcast from Borough Hall, 748 River Road, Fairhaven, New Jersey. Public participation for this regular council meeting of January 23rd, 2023 is available by call-in phone number or through web conference Zoom. Members of the public will be on mute until it is time for questions or comments, which will be announced. At that time, the public has the opportunity to question or comment by phone or through Zoom by the raise hand button and will be called on at the appropriate time. Notice of this meeting was included in a schedule of meetings, which was adopted by resolution number 2023-13 and sent to the Asbury Park Press, the Two River Times, and the Star Ledger on January 6, 2023, posted on the Borough website. The bulletin board in the municipal building has remained continuously posted as required in the statute. With adequate notice having been given, the Borough Clerk is directed to include this statement in the minutes of this meeting. Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Council members Paul. Yes. Hoey. Here. Koch. Here. Barbera.
Here.
Neff. Here. Rodriguez.
Here. Thank you. Starting off, Chief McGovern, you mentioned to me you had a request.
Yeah, Mayor, Council, tonight I ask you to appoint Liam Stevens as probation police officer. Liam has been with us for about 3 years. He worked for the Borough Department for a short time before that, and now he's a Class 2 special for us. For about 2 years, he's done a great job. We had a process, and Liam was picked. I ask you tonight to proceed to appoint him.
Thank you, Chief. Resolution 2023-41, hire police patrolman Liam Stevens. Anyone have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Council members Paul.
Yes.
Hoey.
Yes.
Koch.
Yes.
Barbera.
Yes.
Neff.
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Thank you. Patrolman Stevens, please come forward for your oath of office.
Also tonight, with him is his mom and dad, his brother, who works for the Borough, and his uncle, who retired sergeant from Lomer. They're all here tonight.
Allison,
You
will
wanna
you?
hold the Bible? You want to- you can swear.
Repeat after me. I, Liam Stevens, do solemnly swear that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution
the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the State of New Jersey,
of the State of New Jersey,
that I will bear true faith
that I will bear true faith
and allegiance
and allegiance
to the same
to the same
and to the governments
and to the governments
established in the United States
established in the United States
and in this state,
and in this state,
under the authority
under the authority
of the people,
of the people,
and that I will faithfully,
and that I will faithfully,
impartially,
impartially,
and justly perform
and justly perform
the duties of
the duties of
patrolman
patrolman
according to the best
according to the best
of
of
my ability.
my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Very excited.
One more round of applause. Coleman.
Thanks, Trap.
I just want to thank everybody, especially the chief, the council, and everybody for, whenever I came to you guys with questions about the process and everything, everybody was there to help me. So thanks, everybody.
All right, next order of business, workshop session, street opening request from New Jersey Natural Gas. 72 Parker Avenue, service retirement, 153 Kemp Avenue, service renewal. Does anyone want to discuss these? Or look for a motion?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, next up, a proposed special meeting on January the 30th for facilities. Does anyone want to discuss this?
I know I will have a conflict, unfortunately.
Everyone else is all right with the 7 PM time on the 30th?
Yes, sir.
And this is only remote, because it says hybrid platform, but I don't know.
No, it's gonna be like we know more meetings
Oh,
in person.
Anyone have a,
motion.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
We're gonna add a resolution to the end of the agenda. for
Okay.
that.
So if we're taking notes here, it's going to be resolution on the consent agenda 2023-54. Special meeting January 30th, 2023 at 7 PM for borough facilities. Okay, next up is public comment on agenda items only. This is only for agenda items. Please stand and identify yourself by clearly stating your name and address for the record. Please try to observe a time limit of 3 minutes. Anyone in the public have any comments on agenda items only? No? Allison, anyone online?
Nobody has their hand raised now.
Okay, we're going to move towards approval of minutes. I'm talking about December 19th, 2022 regular meeting and the executive session. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Allison, may I please have a roll call?
I mean, hold on. He can't make
He
a
wasn't
second
here.
because he wasn't in
He was
there.
on council.
Second. Which one are you discussing
The
now?
ninth.
The ninth.
December
Council
19th.
members, Paul,
Yeah, yes.
December
Aye.
19th. I wasn't there.
Even though we were elect and part of the
No.
no,
check.
so Paul,
Yes.
Koch,
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Thank you. January 3rd, 2023 reorganization meeting. I have a motion.
Motion.
Second.
Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Council members,
Yes.
Koch, or Hoey,
Yes.
Koch,
Yes.
Rivera,
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Thank you. January 9th, 2023 special meeting.
Motion.
Second.
Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Council members, Cole,
Yes.
Hoey, yes, Rivera,
Yes.
Neff,
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
January 9th executive session. Motion.
Motion.
Second.
Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Council members, Hoey,
Yes.
Rivera,
Yes.
Neff,
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Thank you. Old business, we're gonna have a facilities update. Councilman LaBarbera.
Thank you, Mayor. So we're gonna put up a presentation update. It'll be made available after presentation. There was a V2 that went up on DPW from the January 9th meeting. was a translation with one of the formulas, just see it out there, it corrected it to 40%. So if anybody has any questions on that, please feel free to reach out. So, we'll give it 1 second. We're gonna talk about DPW and PD today. We're gonna start with DPW. So at the 9 January meeting, there were a handful of action items that came out both for DPW and PD. There was some synergy between the two, specifically to the LSRP discussion, right, with the site environmental assessment and remediation work that's been required, as well as a financial discussion that Mr. Mayor asked for, specific to getting ahead of any bond language, ordinances, et cetera, that would have to be reconciled depending on how we're gonna move forward. I'll combine the LSRP financial update. So from a review perspective, PD is around 70% complete. DPW is 33% complete. There's gonna be a meeting taking this place, I believe it's Thursday, ultimately to talk about the extent of site remediation contingent upon the type of work that will take place on the site. So with PD, new building, what kind of site remediation is required based on the environmental review and paperwork, and then DPW similar, right? We went over those AOCs in the January 9th meeting, and the question was which AOCs, if any, are required to remediate, depending on what we do, whether we renovate or DPW. Oh, sorry, page 3, Allison, apologies. Thank you. From a financial perspective, we hired both a new financial and bond consultant in 2023. It appears that the bond ordinances cover what we would want to do, which is a good thing. We are going to meet though with bond counsel on the average life of the projects. And likely the governing body will have to amend the original ordinances depending on what comes out of that. So moving forward, meetings will be in place as we progress. When you look at these two on page 3, the LSRP is probably most, I would say, pressing in the sense we have time on the financial angle to look at the ordinances, update them as we move forward. But then LSRP, remember, that's one of the critical items that will dictate how we proceed forward. All right, page 4. So for DPW, going to dive into the 4 remaining action items. Next slide, please. So from a structural engineer, there were 3 structural engineering firms identified, evaluated. Ultimately, scope was selected. It was based on their ability to accommodate our schedule, expertise, experience, and ultimately that the assessment would be based on current structural codes, which is really, really important. Again, the building was built, I believe, in 74. The purchase order, and want to give many thanks to Teresa, Rich, for how quickly they moved. Scope was the one that Rich helped really provide some additional fidelity, so many thanks for that. I think it's really, really critical that that exists. Ultimately, cut the PO. There were 4 main deliverables we talked about. One, that the written assessment is one signed and delivered by a licensed site engineer, that either they come virtually or in person, targeting next week, 30 January, for them to come. And the assessments to note anything of significant structural issues, i.e. do we got to get out of the building now? Or are there things here of structural concern that can be mitigated with bracing or some other type of mitigated technique? The nice thing about scope is they're going to do an as-is rendering of the building, which is nice to have with what the current dimensions of the building are. Matt Martin, he's the president of scope. He ultimately came on site on 19 January, so a week later. And his verbal assessment, I'll say his tenor, was that the DPW building is structurally sound. We are not going to make any decisions until we get the formal assessment. We look at the formal assessment, but we want to make sure that there was no immediate danger the roof was going to fall in on the team working there, and there isn't, right? Fair? Okay, cool. Formal assessments pending delivery. Rich is working with him daily to meet our timeline. Ms. Martin is very, very well aware of how we're trying to ensure that the life and safety risks, or issues yet, risks that exist don't become an issue, i.e. roof falls on somebody's head, i.e. fire happens upstairs and God forbid somebody can't get out. He also tends to provide a short list of architects. This will be part of a larger list of architects that we look to work with on DPW, whatever route we decide to go, and go from there. Next slide. Roof update, fuel tank. So pending the structural engineer's formal assessment and ultimate decision to renovate, it is possible to move forward the roof project, right? So the tender is, hey, everything looks structurally sound. Obviously, if we're gonna rip the building down and build up, it would make sense to put a new roof on it. That's why I'm saying pending the decision to renovate. The original roof bid, this is old, probably about 6 hours, so apologies. The original roof bid specs were drafted by this company. Ultimately, we have 3 proposals now in. The last one just came in within hours ago. And these are the proposals to send out.
Finalize the design, prepare the bid documents, put it out to bid, and then limited on-site inspection.
Perfect.
During construction.
And ultimately, the goal is that whatever vendor, third party is selected, they do everything that Rich has perfectly outlined, and then it comes back to the governing body to put out to bid. And again, that's all contingent upon the formal assessment says roof's good to go, and the governing body decides what direction we want to go. On the fuel tank, again, this just came in literally in the last few hours. Continued engagement, we got a one quote back from the state. We're gonna be conferring with some other towns that have done this recently to see if the state contract is egregious or not. I forget what the cost was that came in from the state, but we'll have more data points on this. No decision point yet to be made. All right.
One question, the fuel tank, is that's gonna continue to be above ground? Is that normal?
Yes.
Normal approach, okay, good.
Yeah, the one piece on that residents have articulated is it possible to kind of move it? I don't know what that possibility is with a new tank, just so that it's not right there in the front of the building as we try to residentialize that area.
Yeah.
So just raising that for everybody's background. All right, next slide. So when we look kind of at proposed, right, these are proposed next steps and milestones. So when we look at today, kind of going forward, we're going to look to get all 3 roof proposals, what we now have in. We're going to work that state generated cost to replace the fuel tanks that are end of life, and then we're going to meet with the LSRP. So this is what we're kind of on track over the next week or so. 30 January, formal structural engineering assessment provided. That will then automatically cause a decision point of whether or not we renovate or build. And depending on that, we'll determine what type of roof entity we look to work with and request scope of work and cost estimate. 06 February, potentially prepare bid specs and position the governing body to approve the roof. Milestones with swag dates. Swag by very design means it's not 100%. It's somewhat fluid depending on preceding action items. And we never want to make a decision knowing that maybe step 2 or 3 down the line will inform that decision. So that's why we call it a swag. But this kind of gives you a little flavor of what the projected timeline looks like. And it takes into account a renovation. Projected, proposed, again, just providing that swag. One thing I do want to call out, 2 things here. 2, schematic drawings and rendering presented. So whatever schematic drawing or design comes back that is actually presented in whatever fashion, whether it's renovation or building. And then also resident comment and feedback in the form that the government body decides is fit. All right, so that's DPW. Cool, to PD?
Yeah.
All right, next slide. So remember those LSRP financial discussion overlaps. So there's 2 action items, the architect discussion, and then the budget cursory review that was by Brian Mead's group. And there's 4 agenda items that we're going to hit. We'll talk about the meeting with Eli, proposed schedule redesign costs, expected cost reduction measures, and proposed next steps. The one thing we did receive the budget cursory review, I didn't put it in here. It was very high level. And depending on who you asked, it would either correctly render what the costs are, but not take into account site costs. At the end of the day, it looked fairly aligned, but it is available. So let's go in, next slide, please. 18 January 2023 overview. So if the governing body and the public remember, on 9 January, we had the discussion. Councilman Hoey and I were asked to meet with Eli, Councilman Neff as well, joined, and all 3 of us sat down. Prior to that, we collected questions from the governing body that existed and ultimately passed that ahead of the 18 January meeting for Eli to prepare. And in Appendix A, you'll see the list. The components of the discussion really broke down into 7 components: historical context, programmatic changes, 5 design options, community center parking, offsite components, and other building considerations. We'll get into each one of these. I do want to pause on the historical context. The goal of this presentation is not to talk about how we got here and the multiple different iterations that existed, right? There's two life and safety issues at PD, mold and customer transport that exist. They're not risks, they're issues before they become an issue. So if there is a decision, an assessment request that we have what I would call a hot wash, it's a military term, but a hot wash of how we got here and going through that, we can. But for the purpose of this, I want to keep it to the main items to keep us moving forward. The other thing I want to highlight here too is these 5 design options, which were undertaken by Eli between 14 and 18 January. We'll get into them. So let's go to the next slide. There's a lot here. And obviously folks want time to digest it, the public especially, and look at it. Eli showed up on that Wednesday meeting, I think it was. We were there for almost 3 hours. We asked him questions, and the conversation was open, fluid, validating, and he listened to what we were looking to do. He came prepared with these, and we asked him if we can literally take pictures of it, knowing that we want to be fiscally responsible and not endure any more costs, which he came with. So there was really 5 design iterations, and we kind of went through his thought process, because literally the thought process was, all right, here's your current site plan, here's this design version, this design version, this design version, right? And Councilman Hoey, and if I misspeak on anything, please keep me on track here. So when we look at the schematic design options, and you look at the current, it had the basement with the archives room in there, and that archives room was that storage room, so to speak. Design 2, which is Bravo, removed the archives room. And then we progressed, Charlie, Delta, Echo. As we shift towards Delta and Echo, where Eli was able to get us to was to a 1-story building and a significant reduction in square footage. And he walked us through this. Now, the diagram to the right is merely a visual, right? I don't want anybody to take this to bank or try and derive cost analysis or whatnot from this. But the idea of this is as you shift from design A to E, the amount of additional redesign, let's call it, instead of a professional service fee, the amount of redesign increases. But when you look at your project costs and your construction costs, your net savings as you get there, it also decreases how much you're going to spend, right? So there's a balance there. Next slide. When we look at version E, and this is the one that really want to hit, it boils down to a few different components. One, it's 1 story, no basement, nada. Removal of the south parking area. So if you remember from January 9th when we went through, this is like an L, reverse L, upside down L with the building. And that actually creates significant additional site work because you're creating 2 double driveways, or double wide driveways, I think is the correct term, keep me honest. So that went away, and that significantly reduces the site work. The police garages that were in that storage building shifted inside the PD, which makes sense from an operational perspective. That then outside area becomes a standalone quote unquote community center, multi-purpose room with restrooms. When we talked on the 9th, I think there was an oversounding agreement, not only on the council, but in the public, that we don't want to, one, get rid of the PD and get rid of the community center and not have something in the interim. The community center, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, is extremely conservative, and if and when we get to the point where we have a larger assessment of what type of community center Fairhaven should have, this can be converted into storage or some other requirement. And it also, what was really important was parking that we heard. We're actually able to extend the parking lot. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, but this is really what the change is, the bottom line up front, what it boiled down to. Next slide. So just to give an idea here, there's a lot here, but this was the original floor plans. So the basement was almost 3,000 square feet. See you later, right? When we look at the design types, the stairs, the elevator, it's 1,058, 1,068 square feet, those are gone. And by getting it to 1 floor, there's certain things that you no longer need. And so this just kind of paints the picture of where it existed and what the breakdown. We talked about this on January 9th, but I thought it'd be extremely helpful just to see this to where we're going to go. So next slide. Again, because we're being fiscally responsible, we wanted to have the discussion here first to make sure that there was consensus with how we proceed. This is what the sketch would look like of the new 1 story. So the blue area on the left-hand side, that's the one-story PD. All the program requirements that exist, right? And what are they, right? We built them, yeah.
Sorry, I just heard from people watching online, they can't see this, are they supposed to be able to?
Yes.
They said they just need someone to share.
Perfect. Thank you for raising. I will pause for a second.
Says it's sharing.
And this is actually good because this is probably the most important slide I've ever done.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Sorry, just do a quick confirm, everybody can see it.
Yeah,
Awesome. All right, I think we're good.
working now.
Perfect. Thank you, thank you. So when you look at this,
True, start over from the beginning.
listen, I got my 15 to 22-minute mark, right? That's what I'm trying to keep to here. Does anyone know why 22 minutes? Lose concentration after 20. Whole teaching staff. So when you look at this, this is version E, right? We talked about 5 design iterations. Not that we did, that Eli did, right? A to B to C to D to E. This was the ultimate one. So on the left-hand side, that kind of bluish greenish shaded area, that'd be the one-story PD. The second greenish area, that would be the community center with restrooms, public restrooms. What you will notice is that the parking lot there, you'll see like the shaded area. The beautiful thing about this is, and I'll talk a little bit about it, is that the current community center and PD are still usable during the entire time. So you don't lose that functionality ever. Which was I would call maybe a requirement from us that we don't lose that. And I know, Chief, we talked about how important that is. So this is what it looked like. Next slide. So I'm not going to spend some time on how the community center got there. It was assessed that this was important background to know the design iterations, but ultimately it came back to the ultimate requirement was we need some community center, even if it's temporary, that can exist to serve our customers, residents, that it potentially could serve some longer term use if the community center were to go in a different location. We talked about rotating, but really what this design does, and by having the one-story PD, it allows you to enable the additional parking for that area. And potentially the assessment is that you can have dedicated handicap parking right outside the community center, which I'm not even gonna say doesn't exist as of today. There's that one handicap parking, which is not too far, but the flexibility is there to do that. So there's some added benefit. Next slide. And this is where we kind of get into parking. So we counted over the weekend, right? 26 parking spaces. There's one designated as a handicap parking spot. Version E, the goal is to yield approximately the same, if not more. It's not 100% definitive to say we'll get more because there is no official design. So we're not going to try and placate or say that that's going to happen. But that is the ultimate intent, the ultimate goal.
Sorry, Councilman, maybe just clarify, how many parking spaces are there right now?
26.
Okay, so.
One of which is handicap.
Right, that's what the existing.
Yes.
Okay, what would be the proposed under
Same, if not more.
the same?
But it's
Okay.
not definitive yet. So I don't want to give
Okay.
like a number and try and think that through. But because of the way the community center now is aligned and moved, the thought process is that one, if not 2 additional handicap parking spots can go right outside the community center where it be. It's like, yeah. Next slide. It's one really important piece, and again, right, the common theme here is this was all the information that was articulated to us, right? So there isn't any deduction in here. This was, the outcome of the meeting and then subsequent discussions back and forth to refine to get to this point. So there are some offsite improvements, sidewalk and curb, that were originally planned. If they're choosing, they really can be implemented at any time. There's no prep that needs to be made for them, right? What that means is, if you remember, we talked about phase 1, phase 2, need versus want. There was this site civil engineering recommended, and there's different tools of thought, but we want to present it here, to not bond it with the other building projects. That's without debt, but ultimately, correct me if I'm wrong, you average the debt life cycle and it really might be minimal compared to what the cost savings would be. But sidewalk curb in front of PD, you build it. Next slide. Some other discussion points. Some of these came post-meeting and some of these came from residents with questions that they had. The constant question that's been coming in a couple of times, I'm not gonna say constant, a couple of times, was, hey, why not use a Butler building or a modular building for the PD? And the reason is these pre-engineered buildings, they can't accommodate, there's a required seismic rating for essential public facilities. It's regulatory, like you have to have it, and they just don't compute. It's apples and oranges. We talked about geothermal and how it's truly in this scenario cost prohibitive, and likely there's other cost-effective energy efficient options exist to hit that. The current site plan includes infrastructure established to support future charging stations. The way we say future is because there's no state guidance and regulation. And depending on who you talk to, it can be coming down in months and years. We know how state government can work and what that can mean. But the point is that you put the infrastructure in place, you're not ripping up concrete, walls, etc. And then when the state guidance does come down with what that looks like, you're ready and you can move and just put the charging station in. I don't know what they're going for these days, $800, $1,000 for residents, not commercial. Solar panel roof is possible to include on-site construction. It does require input of solar design specialists. We talked a little bit about this. We referenced the building Caldwell, where basically the one-story PD, you couldn't even see the solar panel array, right? A lot of feedback on this was the residentialness component of the PD. One-story PD hits that. By not seeing solar panels, hits that, because sometimes solar panels can be a little bit of an eyesore. So we have the name pending feedback on next steps, which we'll talk about. The goal is to really get a proposal and understand what that looks like. 2% of electricity in New Jersey is generated by coal. 94% is nuclear and natural gas. So just a fact for the DEP. The solar panel roof, you will never get 100% cover, 100% electricity generation for the PD, but there is offsetting costs. There's still the underground tank there. We're going to work to get that removed via state contract. We have time on that. It takes time to work with the state. We're going to have initial engagement with JCP&L. So has anybody been to the PD? There's that telephone pole in front. That's in the way of construction. Ultimately, we need to set up a temporary line and then ultimately run infrastructure underground, which is the current standard as of today. Chief's got to connect. It's going to help us out there. We talked about LEED-like versus a LEED certification. LEED rating isn't advantageous for the size of the facility, and that's coming from a LEED certified architect. However, that doesn't mean we can't be LEED-like. And that comes with a whole situation, a whole set of conditions and how we look for energy efficiencies and whether that's a solar water heater that's on the roof or some other component. It provides a lot of flexibility, but it's probably almost double the cost initially up front, not to mention everything you buy, and the amount of lead time is likely doubled as well. There was one post-meeting edition, and this we would have to run it around and get some information, but you can use heavy timber instead of steel because heavy timber is much more quote unquote environmentally friendly. I think it's going to come down to cost analysis for us to decide and added benefit and all of that. So these were all the different components that were discussed and all kind of the work ahead of time. We talked about updated stormwater management rules coming out. We talked about the updated ADA codes coming out in March. And we also talked about how in March, the adoption of IBC, International Building Codes 2021, all of that goes into enforcement effect in March. The only way we would, I'm not even saying no, it doesn't not even worth mentioning if we didn't have to abide by that, we do. Next slide. So here's some proposed schedule and redesign associated costs. So redesign is going to take 4 months. This is all worst case scenario inputted by folks. Redesign 4 months, that would include a schematic design, design development, construction documents. Bidding takes about a month, evaluating bids takes another month. Awarding and contractor mobilization takes another month. So when you add that up, you're looking at September, October. One of the added benefits of this is shorter construction time, around 14 months, which puts you at a completion of fall, winter 2025, fall 2024, winter 2025. I will mention this, but I'm going to add like 4 asterisks after this, what I'm going to articulate. So the associated redesign cost is going to be somewhere in the range of a 30 to 50% fee rather than starting from scratch. There's also going to be that community center building, that context, that background was really important because current design doesn't have that community center building. So there will be something there with that. I'll talk about this in a little bit. The 4 asterisks is that you truly won't know what the fee is from starting from scratch until you get the dollar value. you know what the total square footage is, total cost, what you're averaging, and then what the normal standard for fees is on top of that. From what I'm told, and would welcome feedback, usually it's 8 to 10%. So if your building is X square feet and you're charging $5.50 a square, multiply that, times it by 8%, you get your low, times it by 10%, you get your high. I'm sure everybody has difference and it's probably hard to understand, and it's best practice is a better way of saying it. There would be no requirement to bifurcate current drawings if we redesign, right? That was something that came up on January 9th, right? Why are we gonna bifurcate if we're gonna redesign? And again, the redesign, there are new ADA codes, stormwater management rules, and IBC 2021, March 14th, or the date they come online. Next slide.
For
Yeah,
a question, on the previous slide,
sure.
did you, for, community feedback and for capital review by the planning board, is that packed into that 4 months? from
Yeah,
February?
so yes,
Okay.
ultimately, so I'm gonna skip a little bit ahead, but I want to answer your question directly, right? If the governing body decides to move forward and generate a proposal, part of that obviously is not to exceed value of whatever the cost is gonna be to do this. But it's also gonna be a schedule. Within that schedule, if you remember those 2 RIP points that are raised with the DPW of schematic drawing, rendering review, and then resident feedback,
Yeah.
that all has to be in there. You have to also include the engagement with the Rumston construction official, because that in essence, once he puts a seal on it, stops the clock with any future codes impacting what we design. All of that would have to be built out and is assumed in here.
Okay,
But yes, it goes without saying.
great, thanks.
Yeah, no worries. It's a great question. Next slide. So here's some of the expected cost reduction measures. Again, asterisk, right? We're talking theoretically. We don't know what the new building is, right? What the, average square footage is, but it's just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. So you're talking around 2,500 square feet less. Right? You go from 8,600 to 6,500, 6,000. If you remember the values that we based on from January 9th, which was that study on the Northeast, I added in the office space, I adjusted for the 8.15% inflation. Inflation has come down, but I'll still keep that there. So 2,000 square foot reduction, you're talking about a reduction of 1.12 to 1.556 million dollars. 2,500 square feet, 1.4 million to 1.948 million. So it just gives you an idea when you're only talking building costs, only talking reduction in square foot, what that does. You got shorter construction period, less site work, inflation continued to decline, but what I like to say, any inflation above 0 requires using funds.
Yeah.
And then the temporary relocation space for PD and community center is not required. So, this isn't just one dimensional, right? It's multi-dimensional to yield reductions in costs, right, for the taxpayer dollar. Next slide. So proposed next steps, right? If we decide to move forward with Eli, we would work with him and produce an updated proposal with schedule for the selected redesign we want. Version E gets us the most reduction, but if there's other versions we want to entertain, it's about a 3-4 day process to do that. I would like to see if this could include a cost comparison from the original site plan, just to see it. And it's an Excel file, you just plug in the square footages and it kind of gets you side by side. I probably can do it, but I'd rather have it come from him. Gable Associates, this is one of the recommended solar specialists to reach out to that's done PDs before in the past. We will touch base with the Rumston Fairhaven construction official. We just want to really get a handle on the document plan review requirements and what that potentially could do to lead time, because maybe there's something there that makes it 4 months to 5 months, or maybe makes a month of review to 2 months, don't know. We have our LSRP meeting that happens irrespective because we have DPW. We want to follow up with Jersey for the state contract. We want to gain additional detail on some other parking solutions as well. So not necessarily truncated to this, but how can we better use parking in the area, right? Can we develop a relationship or some type of agreement with the church next door and pave their parking lot, and we can use that in certain times. And then we're going to have the discussion with JCPL. Like I said, Chief's got the connect there. Obviously, the ultimate goal, updated proposal schedule, supporting the details for the governing body to consider whether or not we go with the partnership for the redesign and the production of documents to put out to bid. There's 2 appendix in here that I wanted to provide. We don't need to go into them. The next slide, Appendix A, is just the questions that we initially posed to start the conversation. There were some columns back and forth that add to this. And then the next one starts to, Appendix B, next slide, starts to go through what the proposal should include. Right? There's standard components in any proposal that have to be there. To include payment schedules. Yeah, I mean, you know, there's so many of them, and I have 3 draft templates from 3 different architects just to do a comparison. But as we look through this, it kind of puts together some proposed requirements, not set requirements. So if you go back 2 slides to me, just on the proposed next steps, that is PD update.
I'm wondering, Mayor and Councilman LaBarbera, if I can provide a little more color or feedback on that meeting.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I thought it was an extremely productive meeting last week, and a very helpful discussion. And, you know, Eli gave us 5 potential solutions, all of them giving us some kind of savings or trying to provide some kind of savings to the plan. I think one that we didn't discuss much here was the middle, the Plan C, which essentially consisted of eliminating the basement altogether, but keeping the 2-story building. And by doing that, in addition to eliminating one of the 2 staircases, because there are staircases on both sides, and you would eliminate one of them. And by eliminating one of the staircases and eliminating the basement, it would allow essentially for everything to be reshifted, a minor reshifting of where things go. And it would require, it would enable us to keep a good portion of what has already been designed. So it would require less redesign by Eli. So I think that just wanted to provide that context to the council and to residents listening, that it is possible to maintain a good portion of what has been drawn by making those few changes. However, it really seemed that the plan, the final plan that is being proposed here, which is a 1-story, really has so many, Plan E has so many benefits, or appear to us to have so many benefits, that I think that's why it's being shown here. I'm not clear why this was not shown by Eli last year, or why did not come up in discussions last year, because I know the council and you, Mayor, followed up with Eli several times on how can we make some substantial savings from the plan last year, given, you know, inflationary costs and you know, a much higher price tag than what council was happy with. So I'm not clear why this did not come up before, but it does strike me as a very good plan, because it puts everything on one floor, including the police garage coming into the same building. And that, I think that provides a few benefits. First, the building would be much lower in height. So if you're driving by on the street and you're seeing all those homes, I think the police station will not stick out so much from a visual perspective as it would if it was a 2-story building, even though the design was very beautiful. But bringing it down to a 1-story building just, you know, makes it kind of less noticeable, and I believe might make it blend in better with the neighborhood. By putting the garage together with the building in the back of the building and turning the garage so that when it's open, it's facing the parking lot, someone driving by and the residents will not be seeing what's happening inside of the police garage. That's also struck us as something that maybe would be a benefit, and everything will be inside of one building, and it leaves the community center on its own as a municipal building, and it just really separates the police department from the community center. So there seem to be, I think, in addition to potential savings, which I'm not sure it will be as significant savings as we would like. I mean, $1.5 million would be fairly significant. You know, I wish it would be larger, but you know, we're dealing with inflationary costs and further delays in our plans. But from a visual perspective, it just strikes me as more logical and better flowing for the community. I also just wanted to make that, so I just wanted, because I think we should, make sure we also consider Plan C, which is the one to just eliminate the building and keep the current plan for the most part with the 2 stories. The only other thing I was gonna say is with regards to solar, Eli showed us how you can do a building in which the entire middle part of the roof is essentially flat and kind of caved in a little bit. It's lower than the sides of it, so you essentially from the outside, you would see a roof that goes like this, but when it gets to the middle of it, it's actually a flat middle roof in which the solar panels can be directed, facing directly south. So that will give you sort of the best positioning of the solar panels, but it will be completely hidden back to like when you're passing by, you're not gonna be seeing the solar panels as you would in a home in which you're passing by and seeing the panels. They would be hidden in that middle area, in that flat area of the roof. So that, in fact, the pictures we saw that Eli showed us were quite beautiful, quite pretty, and it's definitely worth considering the solar as some, as part of a long-term commitment to sustainability for us, and just given the fact that you would not even see it, and I think back again to just making sure that we're thinking about the community when we are planning for this. There seem to be several benefits, strong benefits to this Plan E. So that was sort of my take on it.
Keep it with the setbacks and the path is still there.
Sorry.
You want to tell them about the path still being there?
Yeah, the walking path would still be there, so that you're still gonna have the kids and adults being able to cross through. That's another benefit. I think one benefit also is that you can build the new community center and the new PD at the same time, because before, the way it was planned before with the garage attached to the community center, we would have to first build the PD main building, then tear down the existing PD building, to then construct the garage and the community center. Correct me if I'm wrong,
Yes,
Councilman Barbera. But because of this plan to just do everything in on the main building, bringing the garage in, the community center now can be built at the same time. So we would gain that advantage. We would not be late by a year to try to then build the community center. We would do both of them at the same time. And we can rotate the community center in any direction we like, because it's now a standalone building, depending on how we think it fits better for the community. So that was another benefit of this.
I didn't see where on E the community center was. That's what I actually walked up to try to see where it was, but I couldn't
Slide
picture
13.
it.
Right. See the bottom right?
Is that on
That's the community
the,
center
is that on
because
the tennis court?
Can I say
Negative.
something? Okay, I say something. It's, because it's basically where it was. We had the OEM storage, police storage in front of that, and the community center right where it was, and where the storage was now is going to become a parking spot. So what you designed, right, what we looked at over the years, it's basically in the same spot,
Okay.
and then we park in front. If I can say
You
something
can
too.
actually see.
I was at that meeting, right, during that meeting, and worked with Eli now for Chris, actually 6 years, I guess. And E, like I say, E is, I think, the best solution, because again, you do solar panels on a 2-story building. If you, I looked at a building that had the exact plan, flat roof, 1 story. The roof is a little steeper, right? It's a little bit steeper, but you can't really tell unless you really know it's there. On a 2-story building, you couldn't do that because it would be so steep, it would be so high. So that works, number one. Solar panels, I'm gonna look, building that was about 5,000 square feet, 1 story with that type of roof, with solar panels. You had no idea it was like that unless you go on top of the roof. Again, E brings the community center up to the parking lot, so it's not hidden behind anything, which was kind of done like that because we kind of planned that after, it was added after. Parking stays about the same. If we pick an architect, I would, very happy to work with him very hard. Maybe we can reduce that building a little more in size. Again, this is just something we wrote on a napkin, so there's no real plan, but we could probably get it down to even a little bit smaller and obviously save money. But like I said, the both buildings can stay. The community center will be used the whole time. We don't have to mess with that. Where before that came a question, and both buildings can be built at the same time. So I believe that there would be, a lot of savings and all that.
The only thing we didn't talk about was maintain prevailing setbacks. Right, so we talked on January 9th how municipal buildings have to apply by the zoning ordinances. But it was felt, I think, continually, right, as testament previously, and even on last week was out of respect for everybody else in the surrounding area and the neighbors, we should maintain that not only in the front, but the sides and all of that. So that goes without saying. But I didn't want that point to be lost.
I think it's a great option.
My only question, timeline, which might be a question for Rich. Let's say we don't hit September, October to break ground because of government and it pushes back a month or two. Are we breaking ground in December? Is that even an option? Or are we now pushing to spring?
When I saw the timeline, you had up there October-ish.
It's over.
So yeah, you're pushing it. You know, we can get bad weather in October. This year's been obviously a little different. We'll have to look at that as we approach those dates.
Is the idea,
You don't want to start digging that time of year necessarily.
so the idea is you wanna be able to dig, and do you have to have a roof on before the
No, you
winter?
can, I'm assuming this is gonna be more of a slab
Yeah.
Right.
style, so excavate, pour your footings, slab, get all that work done, and then.
The rest of it, you're
It's
fine
gonna
with.
be a steel.
Steel or
type structure.
timber, but that I think is a
So-
decision for us to make.
But that stuff can be done anytime it's just the slab that we're talking about?
It could be, yeah, they could work through the winter, you know, assuming we don't get blizzards and everything else, which will shut things down for a while. It makes it a little tricky with just the mobilization of the site and the materials, because that's something we need to work into the plan as well with the prior design. We were looking at where do we stockpile materials to keep the project going. And, you know, during this time of year, things tend to get a little muddy and you know, unkept, but weather's always a factor, you know, we have to consider that in the timeline.
That's all I have.
Other comments?
I had a couple things. This is fantastic, the direction that we've been able to go. Thank you very much for your hard work. Gives me a great sense of relief. I really want to get the new PD in place. And I want to do it in a sensitive, prudent manner. And this gives us that option. I have three things that are on my mind. At this schematic stage, I'd be interested in looking at some context 3D modeling. It's not a complicated ask, but it would give the council the ability to see specifically, for example, what Councilwoman Neff was speaking to about, you know, these are just blocks of volume in the neighborhood. So it would show blocks of volume, the houses across the street, ones next door and around it, to show exactly like proportionally, how does it nest? Does it fit? And we could look at it from 3 dimensions and that they're 360 view. The other thing that I think would be informative is the elevation of a buildings. It contributes most significantly to the character, style, sort of. We still want this to be a small town charm. It should still have a feeling of small town charming building, but it also needs to represent a traditional PD. So we don't necessarily need to get into materials, but elevations, just gestural, schematic elevations would help us. It actually helps the architect, whoever that is, get a direction. Because those are value decisions based on what we think looks right. My third question has to do with the potential savings associated with continuing to work with the Goldstein Group. After your meeting, did you get the sense that there was enough, obviously a lot of work has been done, that a certain percentage of that body of work would carry over into any one of these 5 schemes? And that would reduce whatever the cost, the project or architectural services would be with Eli.
That was, I mean, correct.
That was the
That was
premise.
my understanding.
So then the other way of saying that is if we went with a different architect, it would cost more.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah,
Do you have a sense of 50%? We're not gonna hold you, but like,
The number that was thrown
20%
out was
more?
30 to 50%.
less if you stay with Eli.
Correct. And because, and to keep me honest, right, man, like, you know, you have multiple consultants that come together for the architectural design, right?
Mhm.
Each one of them is given a task.
Mhm.
And depending on the extent of the redesign determines the extent of how much redesign costs there are.
Mhm.
So, you know, site work might not be as much redesign because
Mhm.
we're taking stuff away, right? As opposed to the building consultant, I'll call them, who's gonna have a little bit more to do, right? But technology might be a little less. So there are ways for us to, this is not a decision to spend the extra money, right? This is just a decision if one, we go with Eli, two, put a proposal together.
Mhm.
And we will be able to, I'll use the word gut check it,
Mhm.
because there's standard costs
Yes.
that are derived based off of the total expected cost of the building. Nothing's perfect, right? And I 100% agree, but we do have data of what it looks like. And if he comes in 50% over what we think the standard is, well, I think that'd be pretty clear what our decision would be at that point, right? But if it's within 8 to 10, which is the standard. So, but I want to really asterisk that 30 to 50%, right? Like,
Gotcha.
until I see the numbers and we can do a cross comparison, so it won't be as definitive as I would like it.
So the last question on that, if I may, if, so assuming asterisk, there'd be some cost savings if we stay with Eli. Does that also mean it would take him less time? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
if I may add to that, you know, I think when we were discussing in the meeting, we were talking about units that the police station needed, you know, pieces that were necessary, and we were talking about essentially taking that first floor and expanding it behind it where the parking lot was initially envisioned, and essentially taking the second floor down and shifting it down to that back area and moving a few things that, and the chief actually has the opportunity to switch a few things around. But because Eli has knowledge of what was discussed before, what the chief had wanted and what had been requested, I think it became a discussion a little bit of, you know, like, well, we can we'll shift this to this part and shift this to this part. It just strikes me as we're not having the whole discussion again with a whole new person.
Right.
We should be able to save some by doing that, but we should double check. I would just say, I think it's urgent that we do this as soon as possible, just back to the discussion of the timing. We really need to make a decision, and I think Eli also asked for direction and whether this is gonna happen, it's not gonna happen, what are we doing? So I think we should really try to keep ourselves to a timeline and commit ourselves to a timeline so that if it turns out to be a goal, that, you know, hopefully we can talk to him to move as quickly as possible on this redesign. Hopefully it won't take 4 months.
And Mr. Mayor, I just want to add one point to add further to that 100% agreement. The how do I say this? The one thing in the timeline that won't be rushed is the schematic rendering. I love the idea of 3D and the decision point from here that everybody's comfortable with what the 3D rendering is, right? Before you go to construction document generation, it's like hard stop. The second piece is the resident engagement, right? And for the communication committees, get it. But it's really, really important. And if the governing body decides to have, I'm gonna call it an open house, right? Outside of this, and we have one time with the schematics, maybe before the meeting where it's, I don't know what it looks like for all of us. But those, if that adds a month to the timeline, then so be it. But I think that's really, really important here, especially with this.
It would be a month well spent.
I would agree. So, you know, yes,
If it takes that.
you know, we're moving expeditiously. I'm 100% in agreement with Councilman Neff. I just wanted to call out those two pieces.
What's the ask right now from us? We
Uh,
we need to
the-
vote on something? or
I don't
just-
know if it's a vote, but it's more of a blessing or approval to move forward to generate the proposal for review.
No, you can go
Just
ahead
to-
and just instruct them to go ahead and generate a proposal.
For building 8, is that?
Version 8. It would be a
Version 8.
proposal
Well,
for version 8.
There's a C and an E, and I like E. And I asked for the 3D thing because that's a long building. And I like what we get out of the length of the building, so it's no judgment against it, except to me, there's still a blind spot in assessing, which has to do with that context sensitivity study, which is not, it's a very simple, it's CAD, it's just blocks, and it can be sent over on a slide and put up on a screen. And that would also be something that the residents, especially those that live in the area, would want to see. So
Can we do that simultaneously?
I would imagine, yeah.
I'm sorry, you asking for that for
Well, if
before we
you're the
decide to go forward
architect,
with Eli, or?
you want to know a bunch of stuff. But you don't want to, he's going to want to know which direction are we going, which one of these schemes should I develop? And to develop them, to me, before we choose, we need to see those two things, which are the elevations can wait, or you, as you said, do them simultaneously. I don't want to slow down the process, but if we could have that going.
Do we want to entertain a 2-story PD, or are we looking for a 1-story more residential friendly building, right?
I'm looking for a residential friendly building that fits in the neighborhood. So I'm acknowledging that Councilor Neff brought up the 2-story building, and should that be considered? So if you guys were in the meeting, so I have a little less information, even though this was very thorough.
It's essentially the same building that you saw before, the same 2-story building.
Mhm.
The looks of it wouldn't change, but just a few of the inside parts will be moved around because you
Right,
lose the
not the
stairs,
basement.
and then you have more room to move things. But essentially, it's the same view that you had before versus, as you said, a 1-story building that it goes further back. But I think
There's so many site
no
advantages, is that right?
No basement.
No
But the
basement.
garage, the
It's
police
just
garage
that
is
it
attached.
becomes a bit longer because now that, that parking lot area becomes part of the back of the building. So I mean, I agree, but I think from the street, I'm not sure to what degree you would see so much of the building. Depends on how we landscape it.
Right. Well, is everyone in agreement on E?
Yeah.
Okay.
Move forward with you.
Okay.
Yeah. I just think that, I'll let you speak better, but Eli it might be difficult to get this from Eli and have him work with us on 3D versions and everything else unless we have a contract with them moving forward.
Maybe, but those are essential, the elevations, at a schematic level. I want to be able, from a communications and outreach standpoint, I want to be able to show the 3D modeling for context sensitivity,
100%.
the elevations, so people can say, oh, I like the brick, or, and the plans, the site plans,
Copy that.
at a schematic level.
Totally get it. And I
Okay.
think part of the proposal, I'm gonna call it an open house event.
Sure.
just quote unquote, and those are 3 requirements that have to be met.
Yeah.
Can you want each architect to provide that, each whoever is bidding, or are we gonna do another, are we gonna do another?
Well,
Just Eli, or?
I'm saying we move with Eli, but we don't have any other architects to do this with.
It
Well,
sounds
just-
like there's savings.
Yeah, the historical context was, I think Eli came in like 30% cheaper than the highest bidder when we bid it out originally. And we had 3 or 4 come back, 5 came back. So he was already as tight and compact on his pricing as he could be. But it was also once we locked it in, he didn't hit us for a lot of change orders. Unfortunately, many councils did what they did over the last many years. and we
I'm
need to rehash that.
comfortable with Eli. I'm comfortable with this. All this is deciding is that we're putting a proposal together. Right? If we get the proposal back and the numbers don't make sense or some other data point comes up, then so be it. This is not saying that Eli's gonna build it. This is that Eli's gonna generate a proposal for us to look at.
To review on next Monday.
100%. Well.
Is that what we're doing Monday?
What are we doing Monday?
Monday's definitely DPW with.
Oh, so it's not
With the
DPW.
structural assessment
Understood.
with this. It
Hopefully
depends.
we'll have that.
It depends on how, it's a very, if you go to slide 14. I like slide 19, 20, sorry. You go to slide 20, we're gonna do our best to do all of these in a week. If we don't get it and it gets moved to the 6th, right? But that's still within plus or minus 6 days of targeting approval in order to initiate the clock. So you're gonna hear me say, start the clock. So we want to start the clock. And I'll work really closely, and I'll circle up, we'll make sure that from a schedule realistic perspective, but I'm confident to work with Eli over the next week to put together a proposal. If we hit it for the 30th, great. If it doesn't come until 6th, the 30th will not be wasted because we're working with scope engineering to get us the assessment at a decision point to renovate or do new building at DPW. So that is what I'm asking.
Can I ask one question or
Please.
clarify? If we go with the two-story police department, then the probably no options for solar exist, correct?
Right, because the roof gets too thick, too high.
Maybe I can ask that question when I reach out to Gable Associates and I'll ask them
Okay.
specifically.
Okay.
Because I see Caldwell, or Maplewood, excuse me, had it, they're 2 stories, so I don't
It
know,
was,
but
I think the building he showed us was actually 3 stories, so you can definitely do it. It would just require redesign of that building, of the roof itself, because it goes up like this, and then this middle part is kind of lowered, but it's a little bit lower,
And it's
so that you have, it's recessed down so that it's flat, and then you have the panels like this, and then from the outside, you don't see it, you just see the
Right.
peak of the roof like that.
I thought I recalled in the current design, the configuration didn't allow solar panels because of the facing to the north. Is that accurate?
it,
I think that's what the story was.
Yeah, it's the
For the
wrong
PV.
position.
Yes.
Okay.
Over here.
Yes.
Last thought. Can Eli stick to the tight, swift pace that
yes,
we are saying?
we asked that question. last
Okay.
week, yeah.
All right,
And just so you know
in
what,
which case I'm comfortable, and I think that's the wisest choice for Fairhaven to
And-
get the cost savings and get the work done.
100%. And the other thing too that was made very, very clear to Eli, if the governing body approves everything, is that there's bi-weekly meetings
Mhm.
at the council level. Not all of us, right, because we can't have a discussion, right? But
Mhm.
that there's bi-weekly meetings, the communication there, sometimes these specific decision points that come back to the council, include the open house, right, the
Okay.
schematics, right? So,
An ongoing communication push to the community, and we already have a collaboration with folks that are part of like, that have an interest in being energy efficient, as you know, Tracy. So, they'll very much have to see the table throughout the process.
Great. Thank you, Councilman Hoey, Neff, Borough. Thank you.
thank you for the trust. It's really important.
Moving along, new business, council committee reports. We're going to start off with finance, Councilwoman Neff.
All right, so the finance committee is gonna be meeting on the 1st of February, so we'll have more to report via after that. I think one of the key items we are discussing with will be our budgeting process for the year. I just thought I would make a few comments, if I may, on the natural fuels, natural area advisory committee. Because we had a meeting last week, and it's the first year that I am the liaison to the committee, and I thought it was a very informative process for me. First of all, I just want to say it's impressive how much work that Fairhaven Fuels Natural Area Advisory Committee does. The number of volunteers, not only the members of the committee, but also the volunteers. It's really extremely impressive, the work they do and the love they have for Fairhaven Fuels. So really appreciate that. There are a few asks from the committee. One is to present their annual report in February. They also are looking to restore the northwest section of the natural fuels. And they're asking for a chance to present on that in March. The other question I just wanted to raise is that the question was asked whether administrative support could be provided to the committee. And I was having someone who could type the meeting notes. I had a question to the council and to Teresa. First of all, can this committee publish its agenda and meetings? They're not required to, but if they want to, can they do it? And two, if they can do it and they choose to do so, should we have someone from the borough typing the meeting notes and attending the meeting? That's, I just wanted to throw that out there. Just in terms of whether we can bring it more in line with what we do for the environmental commission and the other groups that we have.
This past year was the first time we provided paid in-house support to our commissions. And that, of course, would be your environmental commission, your shade tree commission, and your historic preservation. Because they're different, we have all kinds of committees in Borough Fairhaven, Natural being one of them, but they're not required to post their agendas, they're not required to keep minutes, they're not required, and so generally speaking, the governing body can choose to put any kind of administrative support they want in any committee, but we'll have to pay someone to attend meetings.
I would say there's, can you visualize the organizational chart that was produced from Outreach and Communications last year? I think we probably have, there's about 250 volunteers, and aside from the commissions, and now there are 3 new committees. I think we have like between 9 and 12 committees, all doing important work, and particularly, I agree with you, what the Natural Area Advisory Committee does is astounding. It's really phenomenal work. I don't think we have the ability to provide dedicated staff for each one. But I know that we can do certain things that don't require a salary or payroll. And we're going to be talking about it on Thursday at the Outreach and Communications meeting, so that these parts of government can talk to each other and coordinate more efficiently. And then the last thought would be, I don't see why notes and agendas and meeting times couldn't also be on the website. That seems like.
Yeah, I think one, the question of administrative support, we should think about that. I'm not asking for us to make a decision on that, but if they are, it seemed like the committee members did really want to have their agenda put out there, the minutes put out there, to help increase the visibility of the work they do, to be more transparent about what they're doing. There's also a subcommittee being created to discuss more of the short-term and long-range strategies. So their strategy and their role advising the council is more transparent, and to find better ways to work with the DPW in a more efficient way. So I think it would help increase their visibility. There seemed to be an impression that they're not allowed to do so, but I thought that might be an incorrect understanding, that maybe as a committee, they can choose to post their notes. There's nothing confidential about what they discuss.
I mean, we'll discuss it, but any notes they want to post or agenda they want to post, send it over, we'll get it to Betty Ann, and we'll get it up on the website. I don't think that's a problem, is it?
It's not, but of course, it's not official minutes unless, of course, they're recorded and voted on, and that's a whole different process.
Right.
But, if they, want to just put up their agenda for the meeting, or, notes afterwards, I don't see any reason why they
I don't
can't.
see any problem.
Okay,
But it's very different than minutes, which are a whole different process.
great, thank you.
And they're not required to keep them, and, it's the reason why.
Call them notes.
Right.
Doesn't open any risk.
Thank
Also, moving along, personnel, followed by Parks and Recreation, Councilwoman Hoey.
Sure. We had our first meeting of the year today. A lot of essential follow-ups to the great work that was done last year and years before. We discussed several topics, the first being the need to backfill the assistant for DPW zoning and engineering. That role will be posted within the next week. I think given the ongoing conversations we're having around facilities, it's going to be a really exciting opportunity. I think to be part of a great project. So that role will be posted. We also discussed the status of a couple new DPW hires. We will, in executive session, discuss salaries for our non-aligned employees. And then we will have our next meeting towards the end of February.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Parks and Rec.
Yeah, sure. Parks and Rec, we had our first meeting last week. We'll have another first week of February. A lot of upcoming events, which is pretty exciting. So we have the father-daughter dance scheduled for March 10th and 11th. We'll have the mother-son dance scheduled for April 21st and 22nd. The registration information will be coming soon. It'll be open to grades 1 through 5, which is the same format as we had pre-COVID. Easter egg hunt is scheduled for April 1st. Baseball and softball registration is now open, so you can look out for those registrations. Summer camp information will be coming out February 1st, and opening day baseball parade is April 22nd. So lots to look forward to.
Great, thank you, Councilwoman. Moving along to planning, Councilwoman Koch.
Thank you, Mayor. On January 17th, we had our reorganization meeting. Currently, we have no pending applications, and our next meeting is scheduled for February 21st. At our reorganization meeting, we did appoint a planner, and in our coming meetings, we will be appointing more board professionals.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Police, fire, office, of emergency management, Councilman Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, congratulations to Patrolman Stevens. I think they're all over at Nauvoo right now, so the sooner we wrap this up, the sooner we're over congratulating him in person. Kidding aside, sort of great progress from the facilities committee. I know we've already said that, but I'm really excited about the direction the PD is going, and hopefully we'll be able to stay on schedule before there's new council people again. So that's always what sort of holds us up a bit. So great progress though. We had our first meeting with the chief last week. Councilman Lava and I met with Chief McGovern. We'll be meeting with Chief Brister with the fire department either next week or the week after. The firehouse did their Angelo DePonte Memorial Spaghetti dinner fundraiser over the weekend, which was a big success. And then just in your packages, you'll see I want to summarize real quick. There were 508 calls in December that the police had and the fire and the emergency management group had responded to. 20 first aid calls and 13 fire calls, all of which were fairly normal within range. So just wanted to call out some high level statistics if you haven't read through all 80 line items there. So that's it.
Thank you, Councilman. I'm going to put you on the spot. If you don't have the answer, next council meeting, how many pounds of spaghetti do we know?
That I do not.
We don't know.
I'll find out. I know a guy.
All right, engineering and DPW, followed by borough facilities, followed by zoning. Councilman LaBarbera.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. On the engineering DBW, everybody's well aware where we stand with the facility. I think Rich and I are probably talking daily at this point. We are going to be having our meeting to discuss the other projects, right? We're taking a very focused role on the facilities, but we also don't want to ignore the other priorities that exist in town. So more to come on that. Borough facilities, I just want to really take a moment and just recognize the trust that's being established among the governing body in the borough and the town, and that's not something to be taken granted of. So very much appreciate that on all levels. From a zoning board perspective, the reorg meeting was 12 January. We can expect an annual report from the zoning board making its way over to us, assessing 2021 with some recommendations. The next meeting for zoning boards 02 February, and we'll likely be having a meeting with the chairperson of zoning board just to talk about some potential improvements from a zoning perspective. So that's it for me, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. Borough communications and community outreach, Councilman Cole.
Thank you, Mayor. Thursday this week, we will have our first meeting for 2023. I'll be joined this year by Councilwoman Hoey, along with the central office staff, Teresa, and your crew. We're looking forward to resuming our discussions. We will be undertaking some policy discussions, in particular communications around construction. We'll be guided by the lessons learned during recent hands and cleaning work. We have some direct feedback to make some improvements there. We're going to, again, what I touched on earlier, some of the internal communications, we've developed some policy for that, and continue to work on the volunteer handbook. And we're going to introduce a new headline to the buzz called "In Case You Missed It." And full credit goes to Councilwoman Hoey, who pointed out that not everybody can make the council meetings, but there's generally a few takeaways that anybody, if they want to know a thing or two from the meeting, will be made available next day. So we're going to look to start that this week, and stay tuned. Environmental Commission, if I may, they had their reorg meeting earlier this month. They voted in their chair people, Brian Rice and Jesse Murray. They're working on their environmental roundtable, which is as of this time scheduled for February 23rd at 5:30. Shade Tree Commission also held its reorganization meeting, and Chris Larson is the chair. That's the news.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Mr. Mayor, real quick, I just want to give kudos to Rich and Nick on their snow and ice manual. They update this thing yearly. It is viewed as a standard for other towns, just by the number that they send out to. So just want to say really nice work on it. Man. It was really good.
No snow this year.
Not yet, but they're still prepared.
And Mayor, I also wanted to mention that I did send the budgetary request to the various council liaisons for their particular departments, and they can review those and ask questions to their department head or myself as needed before we move forward in the budget process.
Can Councilman Rodriguez and I offer one additional tidbit for?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Is it the spaghetti weight or not?
78 pounds. Just kidding.
The Historic Preservation Commission will be holding its first meeting tomorrow. In the background, some folks know that the Bicentennial Hall award for architectural services on the ADA improvements has moved forward, and that'll be on the agenda tomorrow.
Thank you. Moving along to consent agenda resolutions 2023-42 through, remember, we added 2023-54, which is the special meeting January 30th. Before I ask for a motion, is there anyone that wants to comment or separate any of these from the consent agenda? No? With that being said, does anyone have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Council members Paul,
Yes.
Tony? Yes.
Yes.
Alvera,
Yes.
Neff,
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Thank you. Department reports, December 2022, year end. Do I have a motion to?
One thing, Chief, sorry, Mr. Mayor, on that, just want to highlight the Borough Clerk, 235 Oprah requests. I think that's unbelievable and phenomenal. Thank you. I know I submitted one when I bought a house here, so just wanted to call that out.
Do I have a motion to accept the reports as submitted?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, moving along to go to the borough. Please stand and identify yourself by clearly stating your name and address for the record. Please try to observe a time limit of 3 minutes. Is there anyone in the public that has a comment for the good of the borough?
Hi, I'm Carolyn Ferguson, 7 Colonial Court. As you know, I'm the chair of the Natural Area Committee. Last year, we presented our annual report, and after we did that, the Borough Council took it upon themselves to allocate some money for maintenance of the natural areas or open spaces. It wasn't a request we made, it was something that the Borough Council did. We're wondering what happened with that, and if a plan was ever made to spend it, and if not, and the money might still be available, we have a project that's ready to go and simple that we would like to propose.
Do you remember
I'll take
that? Yeah.
It actually was money that was allocated for McCarter Pond dredging, and the balance of that will be left to the natural area, but I won't know that until they actually do the project and close it out.
May I have one
You mean
clarification?
you mean hydro rig?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was allocated for the hydro rigging from the of the fund that came out of, what is it called again?
It can be,
Okay, so it didn't come from our operating budget and it's not bonded money, is all I was trying to say. But the balance of it, in my recollection, was for invasives.
Right.
Which would definitely help the natural area, and it might also help other areas. So, what was the amount of the contract?
I don't have it in front of me, I'm gonna say 186, if I'm not mistaken, out of the 200. And, that could come in, it's based on quantity, so it could come in higher or lower, but until they actually close up the project. They're supposed to mobilize in early March, and it's only a 2-week project, so I would imagine by the end of March, we would know where we sit with that, or close to know where we sit with it.
What's your timeline for the project that you have? Is that conducive with it or no?
Yeah, probably. I recall you guys setting aside 25 grand, and maybe
It was the net of the 200 less the bid. The commitment part.
okay, so there was a money set aside for both of those in a lump, I guess.
It was set aside for McCarter with the balance going to the natural area.
Okay, What we were hoping to propose is just, in the natural area, there are many leaning trees. They're hazardous to people, they're hazardous to the trees that they lean on. We've marked them. And this is a really good time of year to get a good price from tree companies. So we were gonna suggest that if you're looking for a project, that we could hire a tree removal company to remove as many of these leaning trees as possible. So I guess we'll just wait and see what happens.
But March, they still won't have leaves, they could still get in there.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Marty Ecker, 30 Franklin Road. Speaking of trees, for this question, first of all, I want to thank you for the fabulous presentation that we got on DPW and the police department. It's really impressive. But one of the things, you may have to refresh my memory on this, was I think we had a discussion about the staging of the project and that it would require some mature trees to be taken down. I didn't know if that has changed in any way or if that was part of the discussion. If it's not part of the discussion, could it just be included?
Yeah.
With the
Western edge.
We will, yeah, it wasn't, but we.
That would be great, thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Anyone else in the public? Allison, anyone?
Yes.
Zoom?
We have Mrs. Blazer.
Good evening.
Hi, Ruth.
Hi. I noticed on the agenda on your executive session, hello?
Oh, we hear you.
Okay. On the executive session, you're going to have a discussion about land acquisition. And I'm wondering what the grand master plan is, if you acquire 21 Fairhaven Road, how it fits into a plan, and don't you think we ought to know since we're going to have to pay for it?
We're not taking action tonight, so.
Yeah, there's no formal action being taken on that, and we haven't acquired any land, so it's hard for me to answer your question, Ruth.
Okay, because I know that.
I understand why you're asking the question, but it's hard for me to answer it properly.
It would take an ordinance that would have a public hearing on the ordinance.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm saying is, if you acquired it, what were you planning to do with it?
Well, that would be at the first reading, that would be discussed, if in fact it goes to ordinance.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, are you aware that the streetlights are out in the 500 block of River Road on the south side?
You are aware. I believe that's a safety precaution, correct? Yes. Hi, Michael.
Hi, everyone. So thank you for all of your hard work. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I love everything that's going on. I'm excited that the projects are moving forward. To step back, I think Ruth might be talking about, do you know that there's 2 lights that were broken on River Road? They've been knocked out completely, like the light, something must have hit them. So I think that's what she's probably talking about.
Yes, we are aware.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, great. So I have a couple questions about the project, and you might not be surprised my direction here, but have all the environmental precautions being taken, or has everything been looked at from like an environmentalist standpoint? I'm just thinking, like, how about the landscaping? I have to mention like a living roof, native plants, rain gardens, pollinator pathways. So has that been all looked at? Do we know? Or considered?
So you've had the meeting, so.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say not yet. There are previous landscaping designs and considerations that were put together. From your first question, an environmental standpoint, and Councilman Bowie, Councilman Neff, when we were there, our entire conversation looked from that perspective. Our perspective is to be as environmentally conscious as we can. So Exactly. So as we move forward and as we, next steps proposal, and then when we get to the schematic aspect, which includes that communication back and forth, and we're working with Sarah, that's when it will really come to fruition. And I would expect that the 3D modeling or the 3D rendering would potentially provide some of that.
I think some of the landscape elements that Michael's asking about would come later in the process.
Secondary.
Yeah, so it's simply, wonderful idea, rain gardens. And there's logical locations for them. It's just premature because it's still in this sort of assembling the ingredients. Once we get it baked, then we can start to look at the icing and what we put around it.
Okay. I also, and thank you, Tracy, you're right. I had to throw it in there, of course, for my friends. But also just in general, like the whole building, I love hearing that you are looking at it from like the sustainability part of it. And do you know, will the commissions see any of this, or like, will it be put in front of commissions at all? Or is it just up to us to kind of?
Well, we haven't
Look
gotten
at
that far. We haven't gotten that far yet. What we talked about tonight was what we're calling an open house where all residents can come and discuss. As far as, going out to individual committees, if it can meet with the pace that we are looking to maintain to avoid the issue kind of prolonging itself or risk becoming an issue. That's kind of the approach that we're taking, but every resident will have the opportunity to take a look at it.
Yeah, and everything's gonna be posted online, and we're gonna make sure that we.
I mean, you guys are, I love the pace. Okay.
I think the best metaphor I have, Michael, is I don't think we want too many cooks in the kitchen, but we don't mind the diners telling us how our food tastes. If that makes sense.
I like your, no, and I agree with the pace. Like, I wouldn't want to cut the pace down.
That's a good, no, you bring up a good point, Michael, and certainly we don't want.
I don't want to keep you from.
No.
Well, you're.
But to your point, don't slow it down. Please don't slow it down. I mean, keep going. I like the pace. Just make sure that, those things are considered, and that I know there would be, like, once you are at the secondary point, I know that there'd be a lot of people who would love to, have a say on that stuff. For sure.
Yeah, Councilman LaBarbera has already taken a few meetings on that. He's jumped right on it. He's trying to balance it the best he can while also moving the whole process along. I think we're all sensitive to it.
And if there's a discussion that you want, Michael, shoot me an email. We'll get it set up and we'll do it.
Okay, and I just I think I missed this. You're keeping the historic front of the building? Do you know that? Has that been mentioned?
No.
You can't.
So that is going away. There's no way to keep that.
No.
Okay. That's my last question. Thank you guys for all of your hard work. I'm excited to see this happen.
Thank you.
I don't have anybody else with their hand up.
No? Okay. Hold on, one more.
Just one little diner. I would like to dine at the police station.
Name and address.
One way to
Name and
blend in.
address.
Oh, sorry, Bonnie City 115.
Come on.
We know who's.
Nobody can hear you if you're not close to
Yeah.
this guy right here.
You can't hear you. Okay, sorry. One way you fit in the community best, it looked like you've always been there, is if there are more mature trees on the property. And I just hope that, I know it's always easiest to take all the trees down and start fresh, but I think it's always worth trying to save them. There's one big oak right in front of the police station. If the path, it could just be a matter of moving the path a little bit this way, a little bit that way. Just a little adjustments to save that tree, so it looks like it's been there, and then put the police station behind, and people think, oh, it's just always a way to make it look more.
I agree.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the public? Nelson, still? Okay, with that being said, we are going to move to executive session. No formal action will be taken at 8:35 p.m.
No.
we are going to adjourn the meeting at 9:54 PM. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Everybody was opposed.
Opposed?